there's no reason to stop education.
Come on.
Once they got their license.
Come on. You're preaching my language.
Right. So like I have the option to have him get into a program where they'll just focus on highway driving.
Oh, I love that.
Now we're doing it. I had him drive up to my parents' house, which is 2 hours away.
Oh,
on
wow.
a very congested highway with, here is it too. It's scary as heck, but you got to take him into those scenarios.
Get ready for a dynamic episode of Features Talk.
Hello, LinkedIn fam. I am so excited to be here today for another episode of the Features Talk Podcast live, but this is a very, very special edition. Okay, this is a very special episode, and we are calling this the Moms edition of the Features Talk Podcast. And I think it's so fitting. This is a month in the US that we honor moms. And so what an opportune time for us to go live and bring the mom's perspective of this conversation around auto, technology, and our teenage drivers that we both have. And so I am so excited to be having Jean Reitelbach joining me today for this episode. Jean is a powerhouse, okay, in brand marketing with over a decade of executive leadership experience in retail automotive space as a brand director. So she brings this sharp insight on understanding the customer's voice. She puts that customer's voice as a priority, and she brings that as she, exercises those skills in the automotive space. She is a champion of listening to the voice of the consumer, and she is bringing that same passion to this conversation today because she is also raising a confident, tech-savvy teen driver. So, Jean, thank you so much for joining me for this session.
What a beautiful introduction, and thank you. I have to say that this is exciting for me because of all the different roles that I have played in retail automotive in the last 12 years and in my 25-year career. My favorite is a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you to ask me to talk to you about this has to be one of my most exciting conversations to look forward to today. It's the highlight of my day.
Yes, I am so happy to hear that. And, we don't often get to step in this role and talk about it and have an opportunity to give our side of things. And so I'm excited to dive in because today we're talking about it. We are talking about what it really takes to prepare our teens to hit the road responsible and tech ready, right? What a already just, and we will get into this a little bit later, but just nervousness that I have about understanding driving and then knowing that my teen is there. It is a different experience, but it is also a humbling experience as a mom, because you have to kind of release control and know that you've taught them well, And so before we jump in, I want to hit you with a very surprise question. Okay, so do you remember what car you learned to drive in?
I do.
What car was that?
So that was a Toyota Celica, and that must have been 5 years old at the time. I should know the year. It was a Toyota Celica that my girlfriend had. So my 16-year-old girlfriend taught me how to drive, not a parent.
Wow.
And I kind of lived out into outside of the Lehigh Valley in a very rural area. So I can't even say that I was formally trained. We kind of taught ourselves, but the back roads at that time allowed you to make, and the cars themselves, the speed of the cars, the amount of cars on the road.
Yeah.
That allowed you to make a lot more mistakes. So, and it was stick. So that was a real, That was a real joy. So yeah, Andy, my best friend in high school, taught me to drive on her Toyota Celica. And I remember it because, that's when those lights, you could have one
Yep.
stuck up.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so mine was my vehicle was always blinking.
Uh,
And I eventually ended up buying that car, interestingly enough, from her mom, who
oh.
allowed her to drive it. So that became my car. So in a way, it made sense.
Yep.
Um, because, and we'll talk about this for sure, this is a very important aspect, I think, of what I'm learning right now, to have a young person in
Right.
the vehicle they'll actually be driving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Even
And
back then.
yeah, yeah. That actually segues perfectly into my first question I have for you, because you do have a teenage driver
Yes.
who is currently learning the skills on the road. And driver's ed, like, the traditional driver's ed that we know, it looks different than it did 20 years ago. So my question would be, what surprised you most about what your teen is learning or not learning when it comes to driver's ed? And how do you think driver's ed should evolve to keep up with vehicle technology?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
My answer may surprise you.
tell me.
This isn't my first rodeo.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So my oldest, we had in that defensive driving formal program. This time around, I made the decision not to even use that program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why. The technology in the vehicles that they were driving in with the program were so fundamentally different
Yep.
than the one that he would be in on an everyday.
Right.
And I think that they went over a lot of the road rules. But what they weren't really taking into consideration was how the vehicle itself, at such a technological level, has a big part to play in learning how to take those road rules and apply them.
Yep.
So I'm going to give you a real specific experience we've had.
Mm-hmm.
When we first just went with my oldest son in this particular formal program, the vehicle he drove didn't have the same type of engine as the vehicle that he would be driving. So when we started in his car, once he got his license, and he was going on an off-ramp,
Mm-hmm.
in their vehicle, it didn't have as much power. In the vehicle he drove every day, I had to grab that holy heck handle and say, what are you trying to do?
Yep.
Because just even the speed
Yep.
of a sharp, off ramp,
Exactly.
if you're not trained in in the vehicle you're driving most of the time, and now you're on your own, that itself isn't even technology, right? That's just the power of certain engines over others. That's just
Exactly.
the stability of certain cars and the feel of it, and that feel over others, and really learning your car.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so this time around, I decided to forego that training, and I raised my hand and I said, I'm going to do it. And so we are doing it in his HRV, his Honda HRV, but we're also doing it in all of our family vehicles.
I am so happy to hear that, because I actually, so, I have a teenage son.
Yes.
And, I chose actually to do the same thing, because I feel as if it's not that the formal instruction, it's not that it's outdated.
Correct.
It's just hyper focused on a certain set of subjects and topics that they want the driver to know, which we want them to know, the signs, how to recognize the signs, what signs to recognize, and then some of those basic skills. But things have changed so much when it comes to vehicles and even the road itself. The road itself has technology now, and lights are communicating with each other. We have individuals that are using micro mobility options. So we have people on electric scooters. And so some of these rules have not yet been updated to really reflect that. And so I am so glad that you said that, because I thought it was very important that my son had his lesson in both a little bit of an older vehicle, but also a newer vehicle fully loaded with all of the safety features that I think are very important for him to have in the vehicle, and not just have, but know how to interact with. Whether it's actually him having to do something or him just being aware that there is a set of systems that are at work, and that when you're driving, you will feel certain movements or maybe hear certain warnings. And so don't ignore these things. And so it's that conversation that is so important to have with your kids. And so I'm happy. I mean, that brings me, not many people are thinking like us, Teeny.
You know, my goal is to make sure that whatever scenario he's in, he has confidence. Confidence is such a large part of the driving experience.
Absolutely.
And I said to him, you've been on four-wheelers. You've done driving before. When I'm teaching you to drive, I'm teaching you to look around and to see all the other players on your road.
Exactly.
And I want you to think of every mistake they can make and how you could handle those mistakes. So more than you even learning how to control the vehicle.
Yep.
Because stop, go, turning, all those things, like that's the easy part. A lot of what we focused on is we would sit there and talk about all of the folks around us and all the mistakes that were about to be made.
Yeah.
When he would see them being made, he's like, how'd you know that was going to happen, Mom? And I said, because that's the driving experience that you have to have nowadays. Cars are fast. There's a lot of them on the road. It's very important to know how to maneuver yourself around everyone else's errors.
Oh, that's good. That's good. How to maneuver yourself around everyone else's error is, that's good. That is so good, because it is the truth. And that is a conversation that has to be had in the driver's, ed talk that you're having with your kid, is that it's not just you, but you paying attention to what you're doing. It's the people around you. And that's what I told my son. I said, it's not you that makes me nervous about the fact that you're driving. It's the other people. It's the ones that I know that, are going to get very frustrated with the fact that you choose not to speed. And it's you knowing how to handle that situation. It's you knowing to maintain your speed and not become nervous and let them go around you. You don't change. You don't change what you do, but you are aware that they are there. And so that is now let's talk about homegrown tech lessons. Okay. Because I want to dive into, what did that look like? Was there certain tech in the car that you pointed out, or was there an experience where you didn't point out tech, but he discovered it himself?
Both.
Okay.
So we'll start here, and then you can take me where you want me to go further.
Yes. I
started by explaining to him that his vehicle has so much more. In his Honda HR-V is what we chose.
Yeah.
In that vehicle, it had so much more than even his brother's years. So I saw technology become so much more available, even, in those, he has a sport trim.
Okay.
4-cylinder for a reason, right? So I chose a vehicle that's safe, but it's going to get him where he needs to go. All-wheel drive.
Yep.
But it only has an ability to go so fast without it sounding like you're pushing it too far. And that's his, does that make sense to you?
It does. Yep.
So that part was logical. The part I didn't know about was how much tech was going to be in it. So I focused on three things. I focused on the blind spot.
Okay.
Okay, so the blind spot information system, something that allows you to know someone's in your blind spot. I noticed right away he was relying on that a lot. And I said, okay, like that it'll go on, and like that it'll go off. But unless you use your mirrors, unless you do this old school, you do not have an understanding of the speed with which someone is approaching and passing. It only tells you this one piece of data. This thing is happening, but it doesn't give you all the data that you need as a driver to think about, again, maneuvering yourself or staying in place with someone who's going too fast or hanging out in a spot that they shouldn't be, and keeping that light on. And so what we did with that, I said, I want you to understand what it is and what it does, but we're going to learn it the way mom had to learn it when she didn't have it.
That's right. That's right.
So that's one thing that I think was really critical for him to understand. Yes, this technology is very good. It's going to help you stay safer, but only help you.
Exactly.
80%, like 80, what the 80-20 rule, 80% of the responsibility is on you. That is a tool only. It's not going to do its thing. It's a tool. Learn how to use it. Learn all the other ways that you would need to drive if you're now in your buddy's car and it doesn't have it, but you got to get them home safe.
Exactly. And that is a very important aspect to that conversation as well that you have to have with your teen. And that was actually one of my questions, is how do you help your teen understand, that these systems are assistants. They don't replace you or your responsibility as a driver. And I find myself, when I rent other vehicles, whether I'm traveling or not, and it doesn't have a certain feature that I'm used to having, how reliant you can become on technology. And it's just out of sheer behavior. It's a learned behavior because it is available to you. So you're using it. But it is, I was met with that same experience where even being in a vehicle that doesn't have a backup camera. Now to me, it's like, how did we even do that parking in these small spaces, without a backup camera? But we did it. And, I can count on one hand, the minor little accidents that I've ever had that was me overestimating, backing in our parking. I've never had that many. So obviously we are capable, without technology, of performing these tasks as driving and parking and paying attention and driving non-distracted. We can do this. And so teaching our teens that you guys are coming up in an era where technology is in your face. It wasn't in my face when I was driving. It's in your face. It's mandated now. It's beyond, let's buy a higher trim. Now these systems are becoming mandated, which means they will be there. It will be standard. And so now it's the conversation shifting with making the teens aware that the technology is there, but you still have to have those old school skills, and you have to have that balance. And I'm so glad that you had that conversation with your teen, because that is a tip I give to parents who feel overwhelmed when they think, I don't even know where to start with having a conversation about technology for my teen when it comes to driving. I just send them to formal instruction, and that's great. But now that you will have to take it a step further, because it's too risky for our teens to be in a car and not know how to use these technologies.
I'm writing down notes so that I could hit some things. Now, formal instructions too also come in different formats. So is formal instruction in their vehicles? Is it in the family vehicle? Do you have any say in it? Does the parent have any say in it? And that's why I really took it. I took it back. I took control and I took it back because one of the things I was able to do, and let me just touch on this because I wrote it down here, the backup cameras, right? We just did this all week, practice parallel parking.
Yes.
So what he was doing was using his camera. And I said, let's shut that off. And he said, oh, can we? And I said, yes, we can. So I made him shut it off. And I said, okay, now what? And I just said, now what? And he sat there and he's like, I don't know. And I said, exactly. So if something went wrong with that camera, what would he do? Or if he was in an older vehicle with that camera, what would he do? And each camera also is very different with distances.
Exactly.
What do the lines mean? What does the dashed line mean? What does yellow and green and red, one car versus another?
Yes.
Right? The length of cars. And so I sat there and I said, we're going to turn it off. And we're going to talk about geometry. And then
I love it.
And then I'm actually going to find this really great parking space at the hospital down the street. And I'm going to get out of the car.
Yep.
And you're going to roll your window down. And we're going to talk about geometry as you're moving slowly without your camera.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then once he got the geometry, what I loved about it, he had so much confidence. Like it just clicked in his brain. He understood, the concept of paralleling to a vehicle. First pulling up and seeing if you fit.
Exactly. Yes, it's that test first, which I still do when I'm parking.
Right. Do I have enough room?
Exactly.
And then knowing that, oh, okay, that doesn't, their mirror to your mirror, that's a different geometry rule if it's a larger vehicle.
Exactly.
And so geometry was the way I approached that. With that camera turned off. Yeah. And outside of a car in a parking lot where we could do it, he had the window rolled down. That worked out really well because he was doing it himself. And once the geometry clicked, the confidence clicked.
Yes.
And when the confidence clicked, I got back in the car and then we went to a side street and we tried it 2 times. And then we went to a more traveled street. And then we went into the center of town where everybody around you has no patience for parallel. And by the time we got to the no patience, he was so calm, so collected, still didn't use his camera and just let other people wait and beep and handled it well. And I thought that's what we needed to do. And repeat in the evening. Totally
exactly.
different.
Let's reinforce it. Yep.
The evening is a very different sensory experience.
It is.
Than when it's daylight. And so I recognized that was going to be part of the formal training that would have had some practice misses.
Yes.
So if he could only schedule so many times during the day and he only got one evening training with them because that's how their schedule worked out to handle all the students, like that was going to work for me.
Yeah.
And so again, it just makes a very strong point for me taking that on myself. But I have to tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, there were times
girl. It is so not.
I felt like someone said, what is that like? I said, it's like being on a roller coaster and you're holding on to that thing and suddenly everyone says, okay, hands up. And you're like,
I'm telling you the amount of sheer, and I tried. I was even laughing at myself, Jean. I was like, girl, you got to calm down. But I was.
I know. And he even said to me, Mom, you're really yelling at me. And I said, I had to yell to save our lives. I said, I'll be calm. There'll be moments where I have to yell. It's like, it's like a toddler wanting to follow a ball into the street and you have to shock them with the sound of your voice.
It's so true. It is
so true. Being out of control, you just you're not in control. So you got to use what you can.
Oh my goodness, it is so true. It is so true. I love what you I really love your approach to how you put your son in different environments.
Yeah.
And then you took it a step further and considered nighttime driving, which is very, there's a high rate of collisions that happen at nighttime.
I
And
didn't know.
even, yeah, and even when you think about, and I've had experiences like this where now, and we have podcast episodes talking about just the sheer changes to vehicles when it comes to the design. And when
Okay.
you think about headlights and how they're using LED lights and all of these high beams,
Yeah.
and experiencing that, having a vehicle on the opposite side of the freeway traveling with those high beams on, how it literally can blind you just for a short second. And
Yeah.
here you are on the freeway going around a curve and you can't see. So how do you handle that? And so I love the fact that you obviously know your son. You do, because you know what environments to put him in to really make sure that he's learning what he needs to learn, but he's confident and comfortable. That's what I heard in how you are still teaching him. And I think it just speaks to the mom that you are. And I think that
Thank
is
you.
amazing. It is amazing. It is amazing because it like I said, you could easily hand it off to a formal instruction, type of setting. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that,
Nope.
but things have changed. And that curriculum has not yet caught up to what they are going to experience in the vehicle today. And this is what I tell all of the parents and the moms in my circle. And there are so many moms in my circle that have not experienced the technologies themselves.
Okay.
So their understanding of how important it is to bring that conversation to their teen is not necessarily there. And so do you think that you experiencing vehicle technologies and even your experience in the marketplace itself, knowing what you know about automotive and vehicles, do you think that contributed to your teaching of your son and the education and the information you chose to tell him?
It was a one-to-one.
Yeah.
Let's go back to something you said earlier. When you travel and you have to rent a vehicle and you get in there, it's disorienting.
Yep.
So let me tell you what I do. I always find the vehicle that I drive to rent. Because I've already, especially if I'm traveling somewhere where there's a lot of things going on and a lot of new experiences.
Right.
I want to take my driving experience of a rental out of that mix. I want to just focus on where I'm going. And so knowing that was something in myself that I felt as a very confident adult that travels a lot, that is really what made me think about this aspect of him running in his car versus the program, which had their own cars, probably for insurance reasons.
Yep.
Okay. And so I thought their insurance reasons are not going to help me for our family's insurance reasons once he gets in the car he's driving. And then again, to also make sure that he does, though, experience some switches. So here's another thing that I know. I know that he may get into a vehicle that is very, very different in both ways. One that doesn't have a lot of technology.
Right.
And one that has so much. So we use one of our older cars and he drives that. And then the other thing that I make sure to do is I make sure that he occasionally is driving my car, and I drive a BMW, and there's things in it that I don't even understand. I mean, it's just got everything. And it's got that power. It's a rocket ship. And so I also wanted to see what was he going to be like in that. When he hit those brakes and those brakes responded in a way different way than his HRV.
Mhm.
Was he gonna get hit in the back? Right?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
I made sure that I remember the first day I pulled up at school and I said, all right. And he's like, oh, me in this? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And he's like, oh, okay. And I could just see his nervousness. And I thought, that's
Yes.
good. That's
Yes.
good.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And it's a much longer car. And so
Yeah.
he was about to go and I said, let's stop and let's talk about the car. Let's talk about all the differences.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we chatted about all the differences. And then I think he handled it well because he had to recognize that even his turn is going to be different.
Yes.
But that was really important for him to learn because he's going to be in a situation where someone's going to do something stupid in his peer group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if he can be the responsible one, I know he will be.
Yes.
And so I want to set him up for success. If he now is responsible for someone else's vehicle, whether that vehicle is, 15 years old,
Right.
brand spanking new, and in that higher level of cost, because
Yeah.
I want him to have respect for what he needs to do in that. So he'll sit there and he'll relax. I think he'll know how it's like pre-game in his drive, just like we
Yes.
pre-game everything, even if it's conversation like yours and mine today, right?
That's right.
And so like just knowing in everything that you're taking on to have a strategy, I think is good for him. And then we also make sure that he drives my husband's truck. A truck is so different.
It's so different. It is so different. It is a
And
different experience and it requires a different set of skills.
yes. Yes. And in the rain,
Yes.
because
Mm-hmm.
you think of the back of it, right? Not
Yep.
as heavy. And so it's really kind of a joy to be able to have so many different vehicles in the family for him to try to use. I would encourage, if you're really close to if you don't have that in your own immediate family, grandma, grandpa's car,
That's
aunt and
right.
uncle, like whoever you can get to let you do that, even if it's just in their neighborhood. I think that's a really important thing so that it does teach them to sit for a moment. If there's anything I'd say, have them learn to sit for a moment and look around and get to understand the vehicle.
Yes.
And even, touch buttons, try things before you start to move it.
That's right. That's right. That is so important.
Yeah, test the brakes, right? See what you could turn off. See where if you're in someone else's car, if there's things you could turn off, go to the fundamentals. I'd say that would be the better way to do it. That would be what I would encourage him to do. Go to your fundamentals, So then I think my plan is afterwards, there are courses for him to learn winter driving.
Yeah.
There's no reason to stop education.
Come on.
Once they got their license.
Come on. Come on. You're preaching my language.
Right. So like I have the option to have him get into a program where they'll just focus on highway driving.
Oh, I love that.
Now we're doing it. I had him drive up to my parents' house, which is 2 hours away.
Oh,
on
wow.
a very congested highway with, here is it too. It's scary as heck. But you got to take him into those scenarios.
Yes.
Where, you've got those concrete barriers on each side because there's construction.
Yes.
And everyone behind them is very frustrated that they're going 55 or 60, or now on some highways where it's 70. Can you imagine a new driver going 70 miles an hour through that? I called my husband said it's the death slalom.
It's scary as a new driver. It is. And I don't want to go 75 or 65. I want to go maybe 25.
Right. And I don't say that. I mean, I say that with heaviness.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have room for error.
Yes, you don't.
Life and death.
Yes, it is.
And so treat it as such.
100%.
And so for us to have been doing that, that was important as well. But we will still put him into a program that teaches winter driving. We're up here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And that'll come afterwards. That'll come after a lot of his experience. And the other thing is that highway, he can have a 2-hour highway training. I think
That's
we're going to do that
great.
too. And so break it up. Like, do it for your child. I'd say just like anything we want to do in life, you have to look at your child.
Yes.
Technology in the vehicle, the car you're picking, the family vehicles, their propensity towards certain behavior, slowing them down, mostly making sure, I think fundamentally, that they know that you are proud of them. You're allowing them to do this because this is your way of saying to them, you're ready to
Yes.
take next steps towards independence. And I'm excited for you. This is a responsibility that I am putting my vote in and saying, you're ready for this.
Yep.
So some of those encouraging conversations saying like, I want you to feel the self-resilience and to feel that independence and being able to take yourself to school on time, to
Yes.
take yourself to a job where you're able to earn your own income. You know, this is so much more than a driving instruction experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that you wanted to talk, and we spoke before about this, is because we're recognizing that these 6 months, which is required in Pennsylvania,
Of course. Yeah.
these 6 months are beautiful, special, and important moments
They
that
are.
are happening in that car.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a car.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's how they're going to get themselves to where they decide they want to go in
Right.
their lives. And
Right.
for our children, we want them to do that with confidence.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to technology, if I bring it full circle,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
peeled it back to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And then I add little by little.
Yep.
And we'll still be doing driving a lot together. I'm going to come up
Yeah.
with reasons for
Yeah.
him to take me somewhere.
I know I am too. So I already told my son, you are going to be my official chauffeur.
Right. Right.
And you know, I love what you said. I mean, when you have the opportunity to have those moments with your team in the car, you do realize that it's way more than just this one subject or topic that we're focusing on, which is driving, but it's also how they move through life.
Mhm.
And you have an opportunity to teach them how to do that confidently, how to hone in on what they do best, but also how to understand how distractions will show up. How do you respond to those distractions? How do you remain who you are, but also respond to those distractions? Because that is a conversation I had with my team about the frustrated drivers on the road. You know, you will get some drivers that are very irate and angry. Okay. Road rage is a real thing. There are people that will try to provoke you
Yes.
into making a decision. And you will have to hone in on who you are, where you're going,
Mhm.
and know how to respond in that situation. And so you're absolutely right. It's more than just how to drive. It's more than just here's the vehicle technology, here's what to be aware of. It is so much more than that. And I think that it was a beautiful experience as a mom to contribute to that part of my son's experience in life, because they will never forget that. And not only will they never forget it, they will repeat it with their children. So it's a generational thing that you are doing. It is a generational thing.
That is so true. I want to give a little bit of focus to something that you said.
Mm-hmm.
There are angry drivers on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we sat around and talked about when we were in a parking lot, I said, don't be one of them.
Yes.
So our rule in the house is if you are angry, you do not drive.
Mm-hmm.
If you are sad, you do not drive.
Yep.
And I don't even know what inside of me wanted to teach them that, except that I've seen so much road rage around me that this part of me said, okay, we can always look at the external factors, but we actually even have to look at those parts of our children that aren't perfect, like
Exactly.
ourselves. And I know that anger, especially in young man with, a young man with testosterone and all his energy, right,
Yeah.
doesn't really it doesn't jive well with a vehicle that can go 100 miles an hour.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Not only that, but sadness. Sadness is when you park the car
Mm-hmm.
and you
Mm-hmm.
use the private space of the car
Yep.
and you get it out.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're driving sad, I think you would be distracted, a
Yes.
distracted driver.
Yes, you are. That
And
is powerful.
there are no windshield wipers on your eyes, right? And when, and so I told him, you will be sad. You will need to leave somewhere sad. Even if you're taking your car and you're moving it from one spot of that parking lot or that neighborhood to a street over or to a place behind, say the workplace, say if he did something wrong
Right.
and lost his job, you just go a little bit further, find yourself the privacy, sit there, work it out.
Yep.
Call somebody, talk it out, call me. If
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't pass, get a ride home.
Yep.
Same thing if you're tired.
Yes.
Tired is no different than drunk. You get in
Exactly.
trouble for drunk driving as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And yet no one talks about tired.
Yep.
So let's chat about tired.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so again, I said there is nothing wrong with phoning a friend or phoning mom and dad. And it really does happen. So I know we spoke about those on the road that we see that demonstrate behavior that's not, it doesn't go hand in hand with safe driving. I definitely would encourage everyone to have those uncomfortable chats about emotions and self-responsibility, because it's our job to keep
Yes.
everyone else's family, everyone else's mom, dad, sister, son, neighbor, child safe by taking responsibility for our emotions and knowing it's not time to drive. And they're not
And
going to teach that, are they?
I was just getting ready to say that that is not part of the formal introduction, but how important is that conversation of the fact that when you are angry, you are distracted.
Yeah.
When you are sad, when you're crying, when you're overwhelmed, you are distracted. Your mind is processing multiple memories or thoughts or an event that just happened, and you are not focused on the road. And so it is an opportunity for you to be triggered in a way that could cost you your life or someone else's life. And
Yeah.
so that is such a great tip for parents, is to have that uncomfortable, and it shouldn't be uncomfortable. I guess it depends on, the relationship with,
Family and how
yes,
some
but
families don't talk feelings as much as
exactly,
others.
exactly. And you're absolutely right. And so that conversation about feelings and being in tune with how you feel and how that contributes to your driving and the safety of your driving is absolutely crucial It is absolutely crucial. And that is something that you would not hear if it wasn't a mom's episode, because us moms know that we are in tune with our
Mhm.
children. We know when something is wrong. We know when there is something that needs to be addressed. And so we can bring that perspective to the driver's conversation and education. That's the powerful thing about this episode
Yeah.
is here are the nuggets that don't go into the normal conversation, but they are important. And let me tell you this, that information that you gave your son is going
Mhm.
to be the reason why he is as confident as he is on the
Mhm.
road, and is the reason why he will be a safe driver.
Mhm.
He will be that leader for his
Yes.
peers because of the work that you put into not just giving that simple basic skills lesson on the road, but you took it so much deeper. You put him in different environments, but then you also told him hone in on who you are. How are you feeling? And making sure that you are attentive behind the wheel. And that has nothing to do with technology. That is you.
That's right. That's right. We even made sure that it was my oldest son, my husband, myself, and Chase all driving together because the family is allowed in the car.
Right.
Um, as long as you're related, during the permit period. And he even had to experience what it's like to be driving down a busy highway and have conversations going on.
Right.
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 And even two people in the back, like having a spirited conversation. It's loud. It's a distraction. You might be hearing things like, I tried to put every real world situation into play. One
Yeah.
of the things I do like about the technology, I'll mention this. I like the way that cars now will just not stop beeping unless the
Yes.
seatbelts, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
some friends would just be like, I don't wear a seatbelt. Well, that beeping is so annoying. I love that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
like that it's gonna tell him, who he could look on his dash and he could see exactly who is, not putting their seatbelt on.
Who is the culprit of why we are all having to
Right,
listen to this
right.
warning?
I also had to teach him then what does he do in that scenario? And I said, you have to just let him know you're not driving until
Right.
everyone has it on. And
Right.
if someone says they don't wear it, then you need to say, you are my friend
Mhm.
and you respect me because friends respect one another. And
Yep.
this is what I need because this is a rule in our family vehicles.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just, be polite but firm about that. And if it doesn't
Absolutely.
work for you, I can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So that is one that I like. I do like another one that I really like because I want to talk a little bit about features here. As we're backing out of a busy parking spot, I
Yep.
do love that the vehicles give that, like, I think they call it cross traffic monitor.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so as it's backing it out, as the vehicle's backing out, as it's reversing, it will say if someone's coming from
Correct.
different spaces. So that's super cool. I
It's
do like
amazing.
that one
Yes.
is, yeah. The one I'm not a fan of right now that he discovered, and this was one of your questions in the beginning. I made sure to listen and say, let me answer one of her questions. What is it that he discovered that I didn't even know the car did?
Uh-huh.
It was that he could actually have steering assist.
Yep.
And I was like,
Yep.
oh yeah, no. And he said, did you know that this car drove itself? And I said, oh no, it
See,
doesn't.
there. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And he goes, well,
Yep.
you don't know. And I said, oh no, I do know. It
Yep.
doesn't drive itself. And he's like, well, let me show you. And I allowed him to show me on a back road what he thought driving itself meant.
Yep.
And I said, that's steering assist.
Mhm.
But that is not a car driving itself.
That's
And if
right.
you get those two things wrong, I'm going to ask you,
Yes.
how is steering assist going to help you if a dog runs out in front of the road?
Mhm. Mhm.
How is steering assist going to help you if you've got a crazy driver that's coming up on a highway at 110 miles an hour, and they're passing by you, literally is shaking your car.
Yep.
Now there's someone else who reacts to that fast driver, and you've got to make that decision to stay where you are or move and maneuver yourself into a safe space
Right.
out of the way.
Right.
That steering assist can't do that for you. So please understand that is not the car driving for you. So I think we're still going to go through all of the videos. There's so much. I think we're going to talk about them one by one.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for me?
Yeah, I'm going to say this because I'm glad you said let's get into the cars, because I wanted to know what went into your decision, because I know your teen just got a new car.
Mm-hmm.
So what went into your decision when you picked that vehicle for your teen? Were there certain technologies that you knew were in there that were must-haves? Was it a top safety pick? And just from you telling me, the features that he experienced, he has those core safety features that need to be reviewed. I will tell you what I did with my son is, number one, he took our education. So Features First, we developed these types of trainings for vehicle technologies. And so he has like a VIP seat, every time we're developing these training courses, he's taking them. I won't charge him right now. No, but he's taking them, and he's going over technology that he doesn't even have experience with.
Okay.
And he's also being challenged to learn a little bit about how autonomous vehicles work. And I think that it's very important that they understand the aspect and the real definition of what self-driving is and what self-driving is not. And that is a very important conversation that you need to have with your teen, because often they will misunderstand the technologies where they feel that assistance, especially like steering assist, and they automatically assume, oh, the car is driving itself because there is some assistance in the steering.
Right.
But that does not equate to a self-driving vehicle. So my tip to parents is to take that discussion of technology seriously and take it further than that. And I would say take some type of training, some type of education around the technologies, and have that conversation with them of what self-driving is and what self-driving is not, because they have options to experience self-driving right now. Like a teenager could get in a Waymo and have that experience of a self-driving vehicle. Okay. And so, I know that is an extreme experience for a lot of people, but that is the era that we live in, is noticing and understanding that these technologies that we're talking about today, they are the stepping stones to self-driving vehicles. So teenagers are experiencing some level of driver assistance. It's not at the level where the vehicle is driving itself, but it is a stepping stone that they are trying to get us to, where we are comfortable with vehicles driving themselves. So having that conversation with your teen about what is self-driving and what's not self-driving is very, very important, so that they don't misunderstand the purpose of the technology.
So tell me, where would the education, if the parent isn't educated, where would that education come from? That is different from the old school fundamental education. Absolutely. How available is it? How easy is it for me to find it?
Yeah.
For me to use with my son.
Yeah, there is. And I will tell you this, because we have different parents that listen to the podcast, and they have different accessibilities, right? There is a lot of content on YouTube. We all call it YouTube University, right? So you can go on YouTube and you can find, videos that go over in depth. But what I would say is, and I'm happy to say this, is that we're working on a special project that's going to be available directly to the public. And so Features First is partnering with some safety organizations that take safe driving seriously. And they will be offering our resources, these courses that we are developing for teens and for just the everyday driver. And they will be able to just literally sign up online, and we will drop when those go live. It's going to be a whole campaign around it. And so we're going to rally some of our previous expert guests, to share that with their communities. And then you will have direct access to this really modern, innovative way that we deliver this, training. You're able to get that training for your teenager, and it's specifically focused on technology. You're not being inundated with a bunch of information. The way that we develop our training is micro learning. So you get this bits of information that can be dripped to you over a course of a period of time. So it gives you that time to really understand. But I would say, if you're looking for those types of resources, I don't even want to leave out the fact that the manufacturers do put information on their sites, that you can visit, where they're speaking to the vehicle technologies that are in your car. Sometimes you will run into videos that are not necessarily applicable to your car. So a lot of the times on the manufacturer site, they are generally going over the technology that might be in your car. So it might be a little bit of a dig, but there are resources on the manufacturer side as well. And that's why we're here. We're trying to kind of cut that noise and clear that confusion and get you what you need to know, not what possibly you should know. No, we want to make sure you know what's in your car and how to use it.
Right. So, for instance, if I'm hearing you clearly, I didn't mean to interrupt, but so in other words, even the manufacturer's videos, if it's not the sport trim model,
correct,
it may not be applicable. What you're saying is so interesting to me, because I've had this idea for a long time, because part of experience in retail automotive is also to offer them an extension of an extension of the purchase experience beyond just that day. And as you're talking and I'm listening, once, I would like to continue conversations with you, because this is what just came to my mind. With the dealerships that I really, that I'm involved with, when we want to really create those extraordinary moments, those customer experiences that wow and also meet needs at the same time.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I heard this opportunity for a new driver clinic using something like what you're talking about. I want to learn more, because a new driver clinic is something that would be extraordinary, especially even in those and then, if I'm understanding you correctly, it would be for those dealerships brand specific.
Correct.
You go over all the trims.
Correct.
And then so you can have a new driver clinic. You could start to go over some of the things that are missing from these old school curriculums and programs. And then you can even offer the opportunity for them to, if I'm understanding it, there are videos.
They're videos. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And that is exactly the conversation we have with dealers is extending that experience.
Okay.
And understanding, just like we're talking about with teens, it's going to take a couple of times for us to really go over this. And it's a lot of information, and there needs to be an easy way to get to the customer. There needs to be a way where we can cut all that noise and give them exactly what they need when it comes to their vehicle technology, especially the ones that improves their driver safety. The ones that actually, really work with you, and they make sure you get from point A to point B from your start to finish. It is exactly what we do with dealers. It is exactly what we do with them.
And then it's self-paced.
It sure is.
Interesting.
It sure is.
Yeah. So I've experienced where I've I've had my vehicle for a year, and I'm still going back and saying, can I get a little bit of time with the technology
Yes.
again? But
Yes.
this would allow me to be able to get time without having to drive there, without
Correct.
them having to figure out on their schedule.
Yep.
And it's like having my own technology genius in my
In your pocket. Yes.
Yeah, that's really great for new drivers. I mean, as a mom, I said to myself, I wonder where this education is.
Yes. Yes.
Now I understand.
Yes. I'm telling you, that is why we exist. Yeah, that is why we exist. And it's because I am a mom.
Yeah.
It's because I know that this is needed. And the vision for this company came early on from my experience with my son.
I love it.
I know that there's so many people that just are not, they are not prepared. Mm-hmm. They are not prepared for this level of technology. And it will take some reinforced learning to really make sure that that technology is used safely, but not only used safely, that it's meaningfully used.
Yes.
That means that we are not over relying on it, but we are also letting it shine and let it do what it can do for you, because the engineers have spent billions of dollars building these technologies. So we're not talking about, technologies that are just implemented for the fun of it. There are safety statistics that are tied to these technologies. And so it's taking that extra step to know the importance of it and offering that, that what I like to call post-sale education. Once that customer had that experience at your dealer, how do you extend that conversation that you would have with, whether it's the salesperson or the product specialist, to really make sure that customer knows what they just purchased?
Yes. Wow. I mean, that is one of the things I will say is I did choose a newer vehicle because of all of the technology tools. They are tools.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a greater investment,
right,
in his safety,
right,
because he now has more tools to use.
Correct.
But he has to learn how to use them well.
Yes.
And so sometimes that's not possible, but sometimes it's really wise then to go into a lease.
Yes.
Because a lease can make a newer vehicle that has these safety features possible.
Correct.
And young drivers are limited anyways in their hours and their distance and their ability to go out of state. And so maybe I'm going to share that as well. We did a lease for my oldest son.
Okay.
And that made sense. And then we purchased the vehicle because it was such low miles for us to come out of the lease. I mean, there was nothing even that was going to compare to now what we had already in front of us and in our driveway. And so it made sense. It made financial sense. It mathed.
Yeah.
Right.
The math was mathing.
The math was mathing. And so maybe that's another tip that I'm going to give, because then your young drivers, our young women and men, have a lot more tools. And to your point, there are statistics behind why this technology is becoming required in certain vehicles.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to put my child into a vehicle. I'm going to make a larger investment.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I thought differently about it. Is it because I'm in that retail automotive space that I know a little bit more about how leases can math?
Yes.
So what I would encourage mom and dads to do is to ask, as they're considering a vehicle for their child, to really be educated and taught about that math. What would you say about that?
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree. Now, we collected some listener questions. Okay, so part of our podcast is a segment that we like to call Listener Lane. And so we really like to create content for our listeners. We want to make sure that they are receiving valuable information that's applicable to them. So I picked out a question that I think would be really great for you to answer. And that question is, what's one feature you think every parent should test with their teen before solo driving?
The camera.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The number one, the camera.
Yep.
Learning everything about what all the lines mean, what all the distance actually means, using the camera, getting out of the car, looking, going back in the car, the camera, because it's so front and center. It's so in their face.
Yes. Yes.
So definitely the camera. I'm going to have to go with a number 2. I need to go for 2. The second one is also the blind spot system.
Yes.
Because it's so easy to rely on.
Yep.
It's so easy to be lazy about it.
Mm-hmm.
One of our children has it and the other doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the one who doesn't have it, he does much better understanding when to change lanes, which is kind of the opposite of what it's supposed to do.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to figure that out myself. And I think it's because, again, the reliance on it to give all the data is what the child does. And you have to say, it's just one data point.
And that right there is very important, because as someone who works in this space, who advocates for safety vehicle technologies, but also has the understanding that there is a possibility, a very high probability, that you can become over reliant on the technology, it really is important to state the fact that the technology is there to serve a purpose, a singular purpose. But you also have a responsibility as the driver to have those skills to know that the blind spot monitoring is only achieving one part of looking in all areas and being aware of your surroundings. So it's a conversation that has to happen, because when you start to look into the regulatory space and policy making, distracted driving and these technologies, there's a conversation happening about that. And so we talk about that on the podcast because we try to take a neutral approach. We're here to be a resource to the public. We're not here to say yay or nay, you should or you should not, because there are levels of distraction that can come with these technologies when you become over reliant, but there's also the side of the purpose that they are serving and the reality of how we drive distracted already.
That's right.
Right. So it's like laying the foundation of the understanding that your teen driver needs to have about the technology. And also making sure that they understand they can become over reliant, and having those skills to know how to operate without the technology is still important, and it's still crucial.
That's why we set his to early detection.
Yeah.
So knowing you can do that was why.
Correct.
So those two were big things for me.
Good. I love that you said backup camera. People underestimate the backup camera. We developed training for that. And I remember someone saying, you need to develop training for a backup camera. I said, do you know how many different types of backup cameras there are?
Right.
And we're not here to develop training for every single type of backup camera. What we're telling you is some of them have red, green, and yellow lines, and some of them don't. Right. Some of them have lines that adjust when you're turning, and some of them don't.
Correct.
So you really need to understand how a backup camera works, but then you have to understand what is my responsibility while using a backup camera. Because some backup cameras don't have warnings when you get close to a still object.
The high, the parking thing that's too high.
Yes. And so depending on the vehicle, depending on the trim, you might not have that warning. So not all backup cameras are equal. So I love that you said that. You need to go over the backup camera, and you absolutely need to go over the blind spot monitoring. And I'm just going to throw another one in there: lane keep assist. It's the steering assist. If they need to, because they can manually override that.
Yes.
They can manually override it. They can turn it off. And so having that conversation with your teen about that steering assistance is very important, because sometimes the technologies do, I talk about this, it may, I wouldn't say malfunction, but have a false detection. So it might think that you're trying to get over in a lane, but you're really not. And so it's correcting you when you're driving fine. You need to know how to interact with the technology. You need to know how to feel that. And I would really want to go over that with my teen before they experience that on their own. And that is one of the features I focused on with my son, was steering.
Yes. I back you up on that one. That would be a top for me too. Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing more stressful, especially when it has the pull.
Yes.
And the lines and the lines are going in a direction, but construction has put you in another direction.
Correct.
And it's so stressful to have the car try to tell you to follow the lines, and you know you have to follow the new detour.
Correct.
And nobody wants to wrestle with their car.
Yeah. And in that scenario, who's in charge? I'm in charge. Car. Right. Okay. I'm taking back control over this wheel 100%, and we're going left.
And you don't want to overcorrect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's important. That is super important.
I'm gonna do that one.
Yes. Jean, this has been so fun. I feel like we can have so many more conversations and we can talk so much more, and we will. Thank you so much for bringing your perspective as a mom of a newly teenage driver to the FeaturesTalk fam. I know that everyone is walking away with valuable information. If you don't want to miss our next deep dive into the tech that is shaping the roads, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us right here on LinkedIn to stay informed. And until next time, drive safely.